Chinnathurai & Co. Always fresh, always trendy. Audi offer 5 முதல் 50% வரை. Holidays நாளே நம்ம GT Holidays தான். South India's #1 travel brand.
The want for glory. He actually wanted to be an actor. So these are things that are known, not known, but you know how he is when he faces the camera, how he is when those photographs were taken.
Right. Hello Selvamani Selvaraj rather, and welcome to Galatta Plus. I saw The Hunt for Veerappan. It's excellent. It's truly excellent. It's one of the best things I've seen this year. What I really liked about it was the forward momentum. It just kept going and going and going, and we'll talk about the form of it in a bit. But I'll ask you the obvious question first. So what drew you to this character? Because yes, I know they pitched it to you, Netflix pitched it to you and said, will you do it, and all that you know. But like, what made you say, this guy, I mean, like, did you ever say that?
Never. And so the thing is, Netflix gave me the opportunity to do anything that I wanted, and I chose Veerappan.
Right.
And that's because I grew up to the story. I grew up to his image and the story, and I did not know enough. So it was a very personal quest. So the fascination for the man and the story was there. The unanswered questions, the want to probe, all of that was there. But I'd read 2 books, and those 2 books were extremely polarizing. One was Chasing the Brigand by Mr. K. Vijay Kumar, a fantastic account on the cop story. Then I'd read Sa Balamurugan's Sodagar Totti, which blew my mind for its writing, it really wrenched my heart for the story. It had the mention of Veerappan only once in the book, and that was a very conscious choice by the author, because he did not want to make it a Veerappan story. It had to be the story of the indigenous communities and what happened to them. And that was something that I did not know. I was kept in the dark of that aspect, because the way narrative constructs are built and it stays, you only remember these. You only remember the residual effect of his mustache, being called as a sandalwood smuggler. So you might think there is nothing beyond. But this dichotomy, the fact that there was this brutal nature in his actions, and he was loved so much by people, I really felt there was a story there. And these 2 books really made me feel like there are perspectives that will help me piece this together.
Right. Now you begin the series with a very emotional piece of narration by Veerappan's wife, Muthulakshmi. So right at the start, we get a very sympathetic account of the man. What made you say, this is how I want to begin?
It was always a myriad, the story, its soul landscape. You could say it in multiple ways. So that was something that I knew to begin with, and something that I always grappled with, just the number of possibilities, right? And I had the best guidance with my team. So when Netflix, when Alok Devichand, a brilliant executive, he identified that I am capable of telling the story and I want to tell this so badly, he realized that I didn't have documentary experience.
Now, just to interrupt, he identified this on the basis of Nila?
On the basis of my deck, which I'd prepared for a fictional series.
Okay.
And he realized that I have the capability to tell a documentary.
Right.
His faith in me wanted me to like go down the path, because at that stage every opportunity is a blessing. So I'm like, how can I say no to this? Let me go down the path and see for myself.
Right.
And when I met these people, I realized that it has to be told as a documentary. I might want to tell it as a fiction series, but it has to be told as a documentary by these people, right? So, and it was a crazy journey. Just every time I meet somebody, something new about the story would hit me, and it was always a lot of things to play with, right? It's a great thing to have so many options, but when you want to put it down, it is a challenge. It's a challenge. So how to begin that with, right? So for that, I just wanted to talk about the team that I was gifted with. So Alok chose Kimberly Hassett as an executive producer from LA, and Apurva Bakshi. So we came together as a team. This was packaged as Apurva Bakshi with her experience from Delhi crime, Kimberly Hassett, who has decades of experience in non-fiction, and me, who wanted to tell this story. Every piece that I bring in, we would debate, like, how does this function, how does this function? So we knew that right up top, we want to lure the most of the audience, that is people who don't know about Veerappan. Somebody sitting in Japan, that's the beauty of Netflix, that we could reach out to the world. And how are we going to appeal to people who have not heard of this story, heard of this man at all? So the prologue, that we would call it, the first 3 minutes, gives you what you're in this for. This big story, this grand story, and it gets political, all of that. And having said that, then we had the option of entering in multiple ways, like painting him as a criminal. But something that we realized along the journey, especially after the interview with the wife, was that she was going to be front and center. That was that one unique perspective that this documentary can shoulder.
Right.
You have the cop perspective that's been covered. It's been covered in books, it's been covered but this one, the fact that she's not told her story till now, and she chose to tell it with us, and it was just a beautiful moment to enter the story, to observe the man from distance, and to feel for this girl who fell for him, and then take the turns, and then because it immediately follows the investigative journalist Sunad, who also enters the story with a certain inquisitiveness, and then it goes to BK Singh, who already knows that the story is going to get wild. It just was a beautiful way to enter in, and I feel one of the treatment choices that we were quite sure about was to keep it lyrical. In a very violent story, an extremely violent story, in the deconstruction of violence, let's not be violent.
Right.
Let's be lyrical.
Right. So the reason I asked this question is, now everybody else in the story is looking at Veerappan from a distance. They either look at him as like a Robin Hood, maybe because they are part of that gang or whatever, or they may be looking at him as this guy should be shot or this guy should be killed. The Karnataka and Tamil Nadu special task forces, everything. Muthulakshmi, that is the wife, she's the only person who's looking at him from the inside, because she's his wife and she spent time with him, and to the little extent that even if she's romanticized him in her head, she's the only person who's looked from him from the inside. So hers is probably the only subjective point of view as opposed to the others. That's why I asked.
Right.
Because, like, you know, I thought you might want to go in with a slightly objective look at Veerappan, but then, you know, you give her viewpoint, and see, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm just curious as to why you did it. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, there are, like, actually, the only person who had a complete objective was Sunad, who was the investigative journalist. So he replicates my interest. The fact that he was following the story when it was alive, when the man was on the prowl. So he had a completely objective view. He had no skin in the game. Everybody else in the film had the skin in the game in varying degrees, but
Right.
the one who had the most is definitely Muthulakshmi.
Okay, cool. There's a very heroic, almost glamorous line that says, துப்பாக்கி பார்க்கும்போது அட்ராக்ஷனாக இருக்கும் or something like that, glamour-ஆக இருக்கும் or something like that. You know,
எனக்கு ஒரு attraction ஆயிடுச்சு.
எனக்கு ஒரு attraction ஆயிடுச்சு. You know, so like she's almost saying that she loved that, you know, the mustache and the big gun and the this and the that. Was he that to a lot of people? Was he this almost like a hero, like a matinee hero kind of person to a lot of people?
Absolutely.
Okay.
From that belt, from what I've heard and observed and seen in their eyes, is the fact that they were so proud of him. They still are.
For what reason?
For the fact that he was such. I mean, I had the same curiosity, inquisitiveness to like understand why. Is it just the image? But what I hear from people is, if you had spent 5 minutes with Veerappan, you're not going to forget the kindness in him.
Kindness.
For anybody who comes from that belt, anybody who's met Veerappan, the first thing that they notice is how kind he is, and that is so contrasting to the image that he has. He wears his gun every minute of the day, every second of the day. But what I hear from people, which was rather strange, was that they remember him for how kind he was, and that's the subaltern politics, you know, subaltern nature of somebody who comes from that, who knows poverty, how they respond to somebody else's poverty. That is what I felt. That is something you couldn't take away from him. The fact that he came from poverty, and anybody else that he meets who comes from that impoverished background, he would like to give anything that is with him.
Right. So one thing about this docu-series is that you start in 1989 and it's solely focused on the hunt for Veerappan. And like you, because I've also like grown up with stories following this big hunt, that whole, everything. Oh my God, Rajkumar's been kidnapped. All that has happened, right? We've read it in the papers like unendingly. What I would have liked is like the backstory, like the stuff that we did not know, like where was he born, what did he do, what kind of kid was he like violent, what was it, like not to psychologically explain or something like that, but just as a kind of, this is what he was, maybe he was very gentle as a child, I don't know, so I'm not looking for a cause and effect, this happened and therefore he turned into this, I'm not looking at that, but just a, general lay of the land of what this guy was like before he turned into, Veerappan. Was there ever a discussion whether that portion should come into this?
So I had, with my curiosity, I collected everything. But the fact that he was, the show was about the manhunt. It starts from that 1989. So you see semblances of his growing up, how it influenced him. So the two important things was the poverty, his observational skills, the way he the amount of time he spent in the forest. So that comes when Anburaj talks about how he had spent the years and years in the forest right from as a kid.
Right.
So and the third, another important aspect of the growing up, which need not be said but you can feel, is the want for glory. He actually wanted to be an actor. So these are things that are not known, but you know how he is when he faces the camera, how he is when those photographs were taken.
Right.
So there is a flamboyance in him for the camera, for the projection, and yes, he wanted to be an actor. That he had been sending out photographs to Vijay Vani Studios, and that's what we learned. He wanted to be cowboy. He wanted to play cowboy like Jai Shankar.
Like this is before he became
when he was a poacher.
Yeah.
So he, coming from that village where nothing but forest was your means to survive, he was a very skilled hunter. Extremely skilled with the gun. So that's where the story begins.
Right.
The fact that he was such a skilled marksman. Now, how do you go hunt him down?
Right.
So
that's the challenge. Yeah. And there's literally like a hunting thing, because it's like just like hunters, go after droppings and spoor and all that kind of stuff. Here you actually have a scene where, you say that this is what somebody ate, because looking at the waste that because I think they ate millet or ragi or something like that. I can't recall exactly.
So the ragi, the fecal matter is brown in color. Right. Compared to rice eaters, which is yellow in color.
Yeah, so all those things are being used by the cops to kind of hunt him down. There's one place where we hear this statement where, they say that, well, the chief minister's cot is made of sandalwood, and yet, we get blamed when, we take sandalwood. That's not really like a balanced thing. Right. I was wondering, when you got statements like these, they're emotional, yes. But did you ever think of like arguing back whether but that's different, because that's measured, like there's a trade of sandalwood that happens, and this is all happening, as opposed to this, which is like you guys are just cutting and denuding a forest or making it dry.
Yeah, they always have a difference. One of the things about Veerappan is that in his head, he was so right.
Right.
I tried to go so deep into this one moment where he had a little bit of remorse. I couldn't find a scratch of a remorse. Forget the narrative of whose forest this is. Does it belong to the indigenous communities? Does it belong to the government? The fact that 1972...
But when you say indigenous community, you include Veerappan in it.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So he comes from there, and the fact that there was no education there, no education given. We're talking about like them not eating for 3-4 days together. They had to hunt. To them, the forest, when they see people coming and taking, like eroding the forest for commercial interest by somebody else, then the narrative in their head is, whose forest is this? Right? Why don't we have the power to take for our livelihood. Now, Veerappan did that in a completely different scale, and that's for debate, right? Like in it, it's just there are just layers of politics in this to
Yeah,
be.
yeah.
And what I enjoyed in this is having them speak,
Right.
right? Like both parties, and definitely at places where I need to, where I feel like the audience want to cross-examine, I would step in. But here in this case, it was actually a verbatim line from him. That is, when the chief minister wants a card from Sandalwood, where do you cut that from? While for me and for my community, when I do that, and and again, this arrogance is coming from the fact that he's giving the money to them, and but here it's the gang's perspective, right? And I think there's so much that is said there by just these lines. The fact that this is where they come from. Now, it's not right, and they need to know better, more. All of that is something that can be discussed for later. But for us to understand that where they come from, these lines were important.
Right. First of all, I don't think any of us can even judge, because, like, these are very complex
It's
situations,
complex, yes.
and you can probably lay it out, but you can't really sit down in judgment and say
Yeah.
so and so is right and so and so is wrong.
I had to learn that, to be honest, like for me to because I thought I was going to get answers. It took me a while to realize that I don't think this is the right approach to like find answers. I think I'm going to distill this to a few important questions that can be discussed further.
Right.
That became the approach.
Now, I can understand, the STF people talking to you, the cops talking to you, all that. How did you get members of Veerappan's gang to talk to you? Like, what did it take? And also, once you know that they are members of Veerappan's gang, aren't you already thinking, well, of course they're going to say good things about him? How did you handle that?
To gain their trust, I was honest. I didn't go to anybody trying to paint a picture. I had no agenda. I wanted to get to the bottom of the truth as much as possible. When I went about, and we spent a lot of time in Veerappan's village. It started there. That became the epicenter. Slowly, they started opening up, and it took a lot of time for people to say yes to face the camera. And that happened only when they realized that I'm not going to harm them, because these are people who had spent 10 years, 12 years in jail already.
Yeah.
And they can't read contracts, so they can only go by trust. So that took time. What I was assured of was that they are going to be great in this, because these are stories that we can at the most read about, right? They've lived it. So I know that if I'm successful enough into like getting them to that place of memory, they're going to pour. So we were extremely happy when that started happening, when they started just going back to that place of memory, and with everybody you see a flash of who they were,
Right.
right? Even though it's been 25 years, it's so easy for us to like put them there, because they hold this very close, this story. It's not something that happened and they've moved on clearly. This is in some way like for people to like come to drop down the weight,
Right.
to be able to say that, okay, I've said this now. These are the things that that were troubling me, and I now feel light.
You're making it sound like therapy.
Yeah, like when you go through so much in life, and I've realized that is what happened to a few people. It definitely did, that they felt light.
Right. The other part of the question, which is like, what made you
Yeah.
kind of say that, of course they're going to talk good stuff about Veerappan, like, what is there? Right? Just like the cops are going to look at him at this angle, they are going to look at him at that angle.
Yeah.
So, how did you handle the fact that I'm getting statements that are along expected lines?
So that's the thing, right? I had no expectations.
Right.
I was curious. I wanted to know like what made this man, and I can only hear it from somebody who's been with him. So I'm asking like, okay, how would he react to this? What would he tell you for this? I was really shocked that he would be so happy, like he had just gotten married and he was so happy, but somewhere there was trouble, and when he got to know that the cops were there, he Like, I'm coming, just see how many I'm on the wedding day. Right?
Yeah.
So I definitely went for the psyche. I don't think I ever got a very, like a satisfying response to make me feel like now I know him. I never got to know him. I was always shocked by, like, he said this and then he followed it up with this. Yeah.
In terms of form, the series is just fabulous because you're using very basic things like talking heads, newspaper clippings. Okay, you may be panning across them or whatever it is, but basic newspaper clippings. You're not using too much music, or at least you're not using too much dramatic music to kind of, emphasize things or something like that. When you look back, you realize that it's really the structure and the tension in the screenplay that is driving the whole thing. And of course, when you're talking about a documentary, you're talking about the editing also. So it's like, it's not like, yes, you can plan all this, but then you get all this, so how do you structure that? Okay, so let's leave the editing because that's after the thing. How long did it take for you to write the screenplay? And because your screenplay must have been a series of pointers, right? You can't really write a screenplay because you don't know what they're going to say. And how long did the edit take?
So I did attempt a screenplay. I did try to have, like, this is how it'll be in its most dramatic form, in its most engaging form. But that never helped. What helped was the clear structuring that I was able to do with my editors and my executive producers. That let's have the
This is before.
Kimberly. This even before the interviews. So we had the idea that the first part would talk about the growing up and till the death of Srinivas, which is him being that known as the forest king for that particular area. So this was still a story in those 4 districts. Then it becomes a story of 2 states. Then with the Rajkumar kidnapping, and then finally the end. So wanted it to be more thematic. One of the best guidance was the fact that since this was a manhunt, it had to follow a timeline. By the end of, when people speak of the fatigue and people speak Mentiers, you need to feel it. So I tried various ways of trying to beat this. Tried to have it structured in various different ways, but sometimes the basics are that's what works the best. So we were sure about the need for the linear form, but within that I wanted to go as non-linear as possible. So the structuring was quite clear.
Right.
That we can collect as much, but these are the themes and these are the plot points that are going to be in this episode. And why? Because you need a certain escalation. And the beauty of a series that starts with such a bang is for, like, the challenge there and is that you need to, like, keep up with it. You need to, like, it can't drop. So all we were doing were to try and create these breather moments so you can take the emotion. Otherwise it's just a lot of information translating to emotion. For that, whatever tools that we could employ,
Right.
be it the edit, be it the music, sometimes the visual layering, being with the characters.
Right.
It is a heavy duty show, heavy duty story that you need to feel the fatigue, but at the same time need to feel like there was no confusion. You understood everything, and the layers that the story carries, you need to feel like you discovered it.
Right.
We didn't tell you that it was so layered here. That layers should unravel for yourself.
Right.
So that's the beauty and challenge in the writing. And in writing, non-fiction is editing.
Right. Right.
You can write so much on paper and it helps you. It really helps you because then, like, I have my framework. I'm meeting this person. I'm meeting the forest officer BK Singh so that I can go in depth into understanding Veerappan.
You can prepare your questions.
I can prepare my questions. I can prepare my thematic exploration. So I know that how the castle is built, and I'm going for this particular part in this interview. So for that writing is important. But then a lot of the magic, all the magic then happens in the edit. So editors are like co-directors in non-fiction.
Yeah. Probably the cliche way to shoot the indigenous people would be to just do a walk and talk in the forest or in natural light or whatever. But the cops, they are in their offices or whatever it is, and they are lit like a documentary, like a like a very typical documentary style, whereas the indigenous people are lit in a very, very dramatic, like very dramatic lighting, right?
Yeah.
What made you say that's the way I want to, segregate these two sets of people?
Very good question. So I think the treatment is a reflection of my experience. Every time I went into the forest and I felt something, my mind would be thinking, how am I going to make my audience experience this? And in that sense, the people, the gang members, indigenous communities, whoever I met, the stories that they told me, it was almost like it had to be when everybody slept and outside in a fire. It was super dramatic. So me soaking into their story was so dramatic. Like most of the times I'd be like, because I'd read this in books, I'd read this in newspapers, but when I go meet them and they tell me like this is how it happened and I was here and I could see this and all of that, it was super duper dramatic. It was always meant to be a cinematic documentary. That was Alok and my vision for this, that it had to be a cinematic documentary. And at the same time, with the team we had built, we were also clear that let's not go down the docudrama. Let's not get in the way and create something that is our impression. We need to feed their imagination. We need people to experience this for themselves. So avoid casting and shooting with them. So anything that I had experienced, I was trying to translate that in the treatment. To shoot with the people from the village, from his own village and everybody else, it's what they gave me. Like the couple who were talking about Srinivas, it was a conversation in the night. And Muttulakshmi riding the scooter, one of the times I was waiting for her, she came like that. And I'm like, I really want to capture her like that. Having gone through all of this, she came back complaining about how she couldn't fill a form. And she was trying to take that help. So definitely that's if at all there's anything that a filmmaker can leave in a non-fiction, it's their participation,
right,
and translate that to the audience, that this is how I observe them. So for the officers, it was very factual, like this is how it happened, and they wanted it to be in a very binary way, right? Like he needed to be caught, he's a criminal, he's done all of this, there's nothing beyond that. We suffered, we went in, we faced this,
right,
all of that. So the conversations with that, definitely over a period of time, I was able to talk to them and understand like what they went through and why some of the people did certain things. I was able to understand that a little bit, but for the most part of it, I was able to understand policing because coming from the city, being far away from this, you have a certain impression. But traveling with these police officers, I got a taste of what it is to be a law enforcement, what the law enforcement agency is and what
right,
the officers there, what they go through on an everyday basis. So that's more formal.
right.
And here it was this dramatic storytelling.
Right. Actually, that's a great explanation. When you talk about, putting yourself in the interjecting, I noticed a couple of times that you asked, but why involve Veerappan's family? Or another place where you ask about, there's this person called Rambo, and he's not really known for like being very, gentle. He's known to be this tough guy officer, like kind of things like that. Were you also through this documentary, trying to examine the rightness, not examine maybe, or at least put out to the audience the rightness of wrongness or wrongness of ways in which certain things can be done, and whether, because one of the things that I took away is there something called the greater good for which certain people can become collateral damage, because if Veerappan needs to be captured, like, is it okay if a number of others have to die on both sides? That was something that was making me very uneasy by the end of the documentary, because it was like, yes, you want to kill that one guy, but then there's been so many deaths around it, including people that were apparently nice people. That was what I was saying.
I definitely was trying to understand like why this happened and hope to God this doesn't happen again. My examination definitely was to try to find an answer for myself, and definitely collateral damage can never happen, should not happen. Interrogations, policing, if it's scientific, right? Then you don't have to. So the abuse of power that happened was definitely something that shocked us, kept us in this because we wanted to address it. Hopefully, that in some small way, bring up this discussion so it doesn't happen again.
Right.
Right? Though it's a very, very violent phase in our history, I feel. When Anbu at the end talks about, like, this is what the forest speaks to him, right? Like, that is so true. Like, these are wounds that cannot be healed. And so, definitely the examination was trying to find out what really was it. The frustration, was it why does power play this thing, right? And hopefully we can have our checks and balances so that this is not repeated. So it's a harsh reminder in that sense. Another Veerappan should not happen,
Right.
and that's something that's common in all of us, that we don't want another Veerappan, because then it becomes another violent history, and violence of any kind. How to avoid that? And when the police say that in the last 20 years another Veerappan has not happened, and that's victory to the police, great. But and it kudos that the hunt was like, he was hunted down, Veerappan was hunted down, but at what cost? What was the cost for the hunt? Have we sat down and thought to ourselves? I mean, has this discussion happened? It hasn't. Like, why did Veerappan happen in the first place? Is the socio-economic disparity in those places, has that been addressed so that it won't lead to another Veerappan? And the checks and policing.
Right.
Like, have we discussed all this enough? Was the reason for us to go deep in these things, and just to bring about that right discussion.
Right.
It's not to point any fingers. I mean, it's a given that Veerappan is a criminal, and to go probe further, to understand why he became a criminal is important. To examine the actions of the ones who need to be righteous, that I thought was important.
Right. It's almost like, I know this may be too big a metaphor, but it's almost like, how some people die in the Mahabharata, because they are brought down by trickery or treachery or something like that by the Pandavas, because these guys are supposed to be the good guys, and yet you know that the bad guy is so strong that you have to do something tricky or treacherous to kind of bring them down. But you also make it a point to mention what a tough time the police had, because there's one part that really was very moving for me, was when they said that it was very, very dry land, there was no water at all, and we literally had to lick water off, like the morning dew or whatever it was like we literally had to lick water of grass and plants and things like that, because there was no thing. And imagine, their psyche would be
Right.
so screwed up, right?
Yeah.
It's like, so for them, it's like, I just want an end to this, because my life is going like nowhere with this. It's like you're
losing your friends, staying away from family, this person in the forest, so much havoc he's creating, wanting to put an end to this, and the terrain is so hostile. So all of these, it's very complicated.
It's very, yeah. In terms of logistics, what was the toughest thing?
The fact that we started when COVID had hit, and we could not do the research the way we'd done soft research pre-COVID. Then COVID had happened, so to like simultaneously research and shoot, and to try to build the trust in such difficult times was one thing that comes to my mind. But that was COVID. But apart from that, I had great support from my producing team, that I didn't face the
Logistical difficulties,
but it was managed so well that it was happening over 3 states, and the edits were happening in Bombay and in LA, and to like manage all this, it's great work. And I think it just brought, sometimes the story brings the right people together. It needed people who are so madly passionate to tell the story.
Right.
Like, it was not just any other story for us, because I think we were at that point in our lives where we are getting such a political awakening in our lives, and we realize the importance. We're really, every trip into the forest to meet these people and everything was just proving to be such a rewarding experience as a team, that we were like, okay, we'll go we'll do this, we'll do whatever it takes.
Right. I'm going to ask you to maybe take a side, or if you found that you could take a side. Now, it's this Srinivas guy who got beheaded, the forest officer. The people say he was very good, he was trying to develop relationships with everybody, he was just trying to be this all-round nice guy. But from the way Muthulakshmi says, this was all a ploy just to kind of befriend everybody in the community so that they would kind of tell him things to kind of a thing. This is like insanely cinematic, this is like so. But at that point, did you come away with this person is right or that person is right or whatever? What was, because I'm thinking, I really want to know, did Srinivas do all this because he's genuinely good-hearted, or did he do all this because he had the single motive of, if I need to get to Veerappan, I need to make friends with all these guys and like make them...
Yeah, this is the reward, I would say. The fact that our discussions would be like this, and every time we find a new detail, we'd be like, wow, these don't add up. So we're missing something else. So the thing about the Srinivas story is actually we had to keep a key piece out, and I'm glad I'm able to bring this up in the conversation with you, that Veerappan was caught only once. There was once that he got arrested and he was kept in captivity for 11 days and he escaped out of it, and he was never to be caught from there on. Guess who caught him?
Srinivas.
So what happened in those 11 days is also a huge factor in what happened between them. Like, so it's a myth in that sense that you only get told so much, and some things are definitely only known to people who are not there right now. So according to Veerappan's version, Veerappan's story, he was tortured, but Srinivas in his other, it doesn't look like he would do something like this, that he was a sincere forest officer who cared for the forest so much. Definitely, in his playbook, a good trick or a good method was to go be with the people, win their trust, and then catch Veerappan. His eyes were on the prize. It was to make Veerappan surrender. That was the thing. So what defined their relationship is that here's a man who's trying to make him surrender while everybody is saying shoot him down. One man saying he needs to be surrendered because he wanted the Veerappan to come out and say what really happened in those 11 days in captivity. But the fact that Srinivas wanted Veerappan to surrender, and here Veerappan was plotting his death in the most brutal way because Veerappan wanted Srinivas to feel a certain pain.
Right.
And to make a certain statement, like to behead, and that was a very clear statement from him.
Right.
A forest officer beheading a forest officer.
Not just that, but also the guy who caught me, that must have been a humiliation for him, right?
At that point, it was the beginning of the story. But what triggered him? So when we had to choose, what triggered him was sister. The fact that his sister committed suicide, and he thought it was because of this rumor that was spreading between Srinivas and her.
Yeah.
And the fact that Srinivas was using his family and he had lost his sister. So it had become personal of that kind for him.
Right. You're talking about the sister, but there's also the wife who comes in. There's a very touching part where Veerappan is away from her for a long time and she's trying to justify his aloofness, and she's trying to, it's like she's full on Stockholm syndrome and she can't say one bad thing about him. She's like, maybe he thought we were, being, or manipulated or kind of, like into this kind of a thing. So maybe he thought that, whereas you look at it from Veerappan's viewpoint, it's almost like he decided that he needed some time off and be away from all this because there's so much of cop activity happening around here that he cannot do anything. That made me feel very sorry for Muthulakshmi, who comes across actually as probably the victim in the whole piece. If you look at it from a thing, because in a way, if you look at it, it's like you're married to a man much older than you, and you're worshipping him, you're hero worshipping him, you're glamorizing him and all that, but you're not getting what you want from him. He's doling out things to you as and when he wants, A, because of the logistics, because of the location and all that kind of stuff, and B, because maybe at some point he no longer trusted her. And now she's got to twist her brain around to say, no, he trusted me, but, maybe this happened, maybe that happened. That was very touching for me,
That's the beauty of this, that when these real moments happen, right? Like you're
Right.
hearing it from, you have a certain perception, and then it all comes falling down when you see the real, like these stories being discussed by common people so vicariously, and to like read it in storybooks but the truth, and you see this when you go meet them and they tell this in these moments, is when you understand. For this, in this story, I just kept getting into the depths of human emotions at every point, like
Yeah.
be it survival, be it like just the real test of emotions that are coming out to play in the story,
Right.
in this real story.
Right. And I think the balance comes about because there's one side of the people that are treating the story extremely emotionally, extremely like the other side are like, this guy's an animal, shoot him dead. So there's such a like a
Yeah.
difference between the two
Yeah.
ways.
It is because usually it is a police constable's mandate to go produce somebody in court. That's the mandate that's given to the police, that the court has said produce him. Now they have to go capture. They have to go catch him, and it became an election mandate.
Yeah.
That's the story, right?
Right.
Like political parties saying, we'll come to power and we'll catch Veerappan.
Right.
It becomes such a costly affair, a long affair, and a test of, because he tested authority. Like this whole power is built in till you fear authority. And if someone comes and shakes it up, that's not good. That's not good for them.
But do you think that's another reason he became such a hero, because he was basically saying F you to two governments?
Yeah, I mean, that's, to the uninformed, it's very attractive, right?
Right.
For somebody to say that here's a man who's challenging authority, he has a big mustache, he wears a gun. It is attractive to, if you're uninformed. When you go and you understand, I felt sorry for him. I felt sorry that he didn't know enough. His talent, his understanding of the forest, is so many other. His knowledge has gone away. It's not documented.
As in, what would that have helped? I'm genuinely curious.
Somebody who's lived for 10,000 days and nights in the forest, somebody who's with him for 3 years, Anburaj, who features in our series, he's told us so many stories. And like, say if somebody from the gang feels sick, the kind of remedies they have, the way they knew the herbs,
Okay.
the exploration in so many ways, like, okay, this means you have this now. So they would apparently have just few morsels of rice strung in the gallbladder of a certain animal, and you just have to keep that rice at the tip of your tongue, and this would cure like viral diseases, flu, everything in like a jiffy.
Oh my God.
In 5 minutes, you would just sweat it out and you'd feel good. These things that he had picked it up from indigenous communities, and through so much trial and error, through understanding for himself, and he was in that pursuit forever. Like this herb, that herb. So his forest knowledge, like the fact that within 8 kilometers radius, he would know if somebody is stepping in just by the direction of the bird, the flight of the bird, the call that it makes, right? To understand this ecosystem in such a detailed, nuanced way, because it was about survival. He needed to carefully observe, examine, and study. So
Right.
he did the gang and him, and especially his right hand, Sethukuli Govindan, who we couldn't feature so much in the show. The two of them spent 20 years just understanding this, and they were able to be one step ahead of this. So that forest knowledge, I think, has gone for waste.
You devote almost all of chapter 3, episode 3, to the kidnapping of Rajkumar, which was, of course, I think the tipping point for the whole thing, because till then it was like, okay, another guy creating problems in the forest and all, but the minute the Rajkumar thing happens, it just became like, wow, like it became front page news for like forever.
Yes.
One, why did you decide to say, I want to devote a whole chapter to that? But the other thing is also, did no one from Rajkumar's family want to talk about it? Like, because it was a very traumatic period for them.
Right. So 2 questions. One is a dedicated chapter because there was there was so much to examine in using the kidnapping, the fact that what truly made this man, right? Because he was at a point where he realized that I have nothing to lose.
Right.
Till then, he was trying to build an image. He was trying to like, okay, I'm going to make a family here from 150, 200 members in as dacoits moving in the forest and trying to fight. In their mind, they were putting up the good fight. To have lost all of them, to now be at a point, I thought that was a great place to identify what he really wanted in life, right? And we had done that unraveling. Okay, was it for this? Was it for that? And to also explore the symbiotic relationship between the man and the system, because it had reached
That
the
level.
pinnacle at that point. We had been tracking this man, and you know that he's a product. He is somewhere a product of the system, and he was somewhere a product of his own individualistic traits. But you want to understand where that comes from also. And so somewhere you're trying to understand the relationship between the two through and through. But at this point, it needed a dedicated study. Like, how was the system responding when this man was...
Right.
A lot of things came out, and I think there's so much to understand about the whole thematics of this story in those 108 days. How each other was responding, what they truly wanted, and I thought that was also a very, very entertaining chapter in this thing, that you talk about an elusive criminal and the cop chasing. That was the second part. And it needed an escalation. It had that escalation, and so the whole political dissection, the whole understanding of what the man really wanted. It needed that. Then it becomes about, he wanted to now escape. Was he successful in it? Then it just becomes about that thrilling, that tying the noose.
Right. And Rajkumar's family.
We had Nagesh, who was with Rajkumar. So he's related to Rajkumar. You get the account of somebody with him. We had reached out to the family, and the family was covered in the video archives. So here, one of the key things that we were definitely interested in is the right representation of this actor superstar Rajkumar. And we couldn't have found anybody better than Sunad, who was already part of our story, and who was such a true blue fan of the man, an admirer of this actor. It's something that almost defines Sunad for me, that his
Right.
love for the actor superstar. So we had Sunad. If it was only because after having interviewed Sunad, we were like, we have it. We wanted the representation of Dr. Rajkumar and his relationship with Veerappan, and that was critical. That we got. What the family went through came through the archives, and also this is casting. This is like, it's very tricky in the sense that you need to find the right people, and it needs to be the right measure. If too many people come, and then right. But for us, in how we wanted the representation and the exploration of the actor in the documentary, that was done well.
No, I just thought that given that Muthulakshmi gives a very poignant take on Veerappan's life, somebody from Rajkumar's own family might have similarly made us see how Veerappan's actions affected them personally. Like you said, that's it. Like, you have to take a call somewhere. There are various calls you take of length, of this, of that, or also of if you've got this
I think
content.
the entire state mourned, and we were successful in showing that.
Yeah. That
Right,
you
like-
said, yeah, because
like
they were burning effigies and this and that and all
Just the
that.
love for the man. I think that was very evident for us to
Right.
go now, and to also see through the video archives that this is unprecedented. It has never happened.
Right.
So what we wanted to show was this love for the man, and that was coming from the state. That
And coming from Veerappan, because I was like, when at that point, when you say, when he let him go, they both hugged each other and cried and all, I was like, excuse me, what just happened? What's happening here? Are they like
So-
serious Stockholm syndrome happening there? Because it's like Rajkumar is crying, Veerappan is crying,
So Dr. Rajkumar was, he definitely was extremely concerned and didn't like the fact that there was so much tension, political tension happening because of him. But he seemed to have enjoyed his time in the forest, to be away from the city and the hustle and bustle and the stardom. I don't think he really owned and wanted that stardom, especially at that time. He loved that, being in the forest, and he wanted these people to come together. That was troubling him. If there was anything troubling, in fact, he stopped taking medicines.
Right.
What we hear is he stopped taking medicines, and Veerappan would wanted he wanted to tell his entire story to Dr. Rajkumar, because in some way that was telling the entire story to Karnataka. And so it was a beautiful relationship. There are so many facets, and I think we got the key ones.
You know, I think there's a movie to be made about just the time that those two spent together.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, you know,
For
this is so fascinating. You know, a superstar says, you know, this, in a strange way, I'm getting to be a normal guy, and I'm just going to make the best of it. It's such a bizarre line, but it's so interesting.
Yes.
You show Veerappan as somebody who liked giving interviews and having his photograph taken and all that. Now, if you could go back and ask him one question,
Oh, nice.
what would that be?
I thought about it. So my one question at that point was, why Srinivas? Why did you do that?
Why did you behead him?
Why was that? I wanted to make him understand that he was misinformed. I mean, so many of his actions cannot be explained, and that's something that I understand from people close to him, that his rage, when he gets that, he goes so mad that he would bite into his teeth. And but later in his days, the fact that he wanted to surrender so badly, one of the reasons from like why Veerappan and that impression is, I remember like reading headlines that accept my surrender or I'll kill all of these people.
Right.
And that was so strange. Somebody pleading and wanting a surrender, otherwise he would go kill.
Right.
Right. So at one point he wanted to be part of the society so badly, just wanted a family life, but it crossed the line so far. I mean, he had done so many things that can never be rationalized. But the one that troubled me the most was Srinivas.
Okay. But thank you, because you know, in the guise of a manhunt, you just made me think a lot about all these extra legal figures, you know, like who kind of operate outside the boundary of the law, but in their own way they're justifying themselves. Because there's a lot of people who say, you know, when you see a movie like Nayagan, you know, which is like, you know, the protagonist is actually a bad guy. He's a gangster. Like, you cannot, you know, in any way, you know, approve of what he does. But then you also see another side to it about why he's doing what he's doing. And I think to kind of, you know, you really, this has three-dimensionalized Veerappan to an extent that now you're wondering, okay, so what is all this? You know, like, you know, there is more to this story.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said this, because that's the whole point, that next time we read a small clip on the newspaper, and I hope we can easily read between the lines, you know, because there are narratives, and that is what I wanted to understand, that I was fed narratives, I got narratives, and I went and I was able to debunk and understand the narratives, why they're constructed, and that practice continues.
Yeah.
It's so easy to say, to like label someone a criminal, a poacher, a smuggler. Great, he's all of that. But what can we know? What should we know? The intent was to look at this. What is the importance of Veerappan, right? Like that, to be able to tell it now. It's not just to understand these hidden things that we didn't know about the man and the story. The idea is that it's relevant today. It's relevant till day. The practices by people in power.
No, even like a simple encounter killing, for example, you know, there's a whole offshoot of questions about that. So, yeah.
To know, when I understood that Veerappan was a product of custodial torture, definitely he had certain things that made him feel monstrous, and that is why people often say that he's a villain, he's evil, yes. But there are so many other things that we need to retrospect on and understand, so that these things don't repeat again.
Beyond that, I think it's also, I think what this docu-series really brings is a level of nuance, or maybe the humility to understand that we can never really know people or where they're coming from. You know, it's like it's just so easy to read a headline and say, "Oh my God, this guy is evil," to use a word that you just used. But then, you know, something made him that. I mean, either he's a like a psychotic killer kind of thing, in which case he was born that way, and pretty much that's, you know, he has no empathy, whatever.
That's what fascinating. That was one of the things that I knew that he was not that.
Yeah, but then it's clear that he was not that. So how does a man who clearly has empathy, who clearly has feelings, sentimentality, all these other things, also find that other?
Well said.
You know, that's
like, I mean, this also answers your question of why not childhood, right?
Yeah.
Because we realized that he had such a, other than the impoverished nature and the fact that he was close to the forest, he had a very normal upbringing. No signs of like going and torturing
insects or whatever.
Wanted to be a people's champion. Right. He always wanted to be a people's champion. It's just that he chose the gun. It could have been something else.
Right.
And I just want to sum this entire thing with a quote that you said, the nuance in understanding a human being, right? Two wildlife photographers, Kripakar and Senani, very renowned for their work, incredible work. They won the Green Oscars for their film. And they were with Veerappan for 2 weeks, and they had mentioned this in the book, and that always stayed with me. The fact that it's impossible to understand another human being, but even in the darkest jungles, there is the light of a firefly. And I always followed that. With this one. It was I knew that it was going to be impossible for me to understand, to finally say, I got Veerappan, I know Veerappan, no.
Yeah.
But I always was following that firefly. It feels like I could know a little bit more. Right. And that's going to enrich me, and through the process, hopefully, it would be an enriching experience for the viewer.
Nice. Thanks so much, Selva.
Thank you, buddy.
தரத்தின் தாயகம் கே சின்னத்திரையன்கோ ஏரல் திருச்செந்தூர் மற்றும் தூத்துக்குடி.
ஹாலிடேஸ்னாலே நம்ம GT ஹாலிடேஸ் தான், சவுத் இந்தியாஸ் நம்பர் 1 டிராவல் பிராண்ட்.